funds. As you might know, the climate investment funds are a set of global trust funds that support the delivery of 4 programs, and the pilot program for climate resilience is one of them. So it is a pleasure to be talking about climate resilience through this PPCR learning series once more. I assume that a lot of this meeting is virtual, so welcome all of you online, including most of the speakers we have today. Today we will be talking about climate resilience and Earth observation, a very important topic. We have James close here to my left. He's the Director of Climate Change at the World Bank Group. We have Joseph Aschbacher, the Director of Earth Observation Programs from the European Space Agency online. Welcome, Joseph. Then we will have, both of them will give us some introductory remarks from their points of view and representing their institutions. We will then have 2 speakers, Kanta Kumari. She's the lead environmental specialist here at the World Bank. She's also the PPCR focal point for the World Bank, so she knows the program very well inside out. Then we also have Andy Dean as a speaker. He's the coordinator of Earth observation support to task teams at Hartsfield Consultants. And then we will have at least 1 discussant, if not 2. Pierre-Philippe Mathieu from the European Space Agency as well, an Earth observation scientist that is also with us online. So both Andy and Pierre-Philippe and Joseph are connected online. And we will see whether or not we're going to have Ross Hughes as the additional discussant. I understand we also have Stephen Colson online, so I'd like to recognize his presence as well. He's also from the European Space Agency.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, all of you, and welcome. We will, as you might have seen the program, we will have this introductory remarks, the speakers, the discussants, and then we'll allocate some time for Q&A, including Q&A virtual Q&A. So we will take on also, we will be monitoring questions that will be submitted virtually and try to have the speakers and the discussants reflect on those. Just a couple of introductory remarks before I hand over to James. For those of you online or here in the meeting room that might not be as familiar with the pilot program for climate resilience, this is a program, a $1.2 billion program as part of the Climate Investment Fund. We are currently working with 26 countries and 2 regions, being the Caribbean and the Pacific. And we, for those of you who might not be as familiar with the PPCR as well, the way we deliver the funding is through the 5 multilateral development banks, including the World Bank. World Bank is the biggest of our implementing entities, so they have the largest portfolio. We are basically, at this point in time, almost fully committed in terms of projects that have already been completed or that are in preparation and implementation. And with around $1 billion worth of funding, we've succeeded in mobilizing another around $2 billion in additional funding for resilience investments in these 26 countries and 2 regions. Climate Information Services has received a particular attention through the pilot program for climate resilience. Just to give you an idea, almost 20% of the overall funding, $200 million, is being allocated to and implemented through projects that aim at enhancing climate information services, hydro-meteorological climate services. We have 11 projects in the portfolio that are purely dedicated to enhancing the equipment, the capacity, the systems in place to deliver better climate information to the users, to the economic agents, but also to the decision makers. It is the third area that receives the highest attention in our portfolio after agriculture and landscape management and water resources management. So you can see how much of a priority this area of work is in the context of the pilot program for climate resilience, which speaks to the emphasis that the World Bank and the other MDBs are giving to this area, and particularly the countries as well. In addition to this basic information, the way we've come across and facilitated this partnership now between the World Bank and the European Space Agency was because actually when we bring the countries together as part of our knowledge management work, last July of 2015, we actually did it in partnership with the European Space Agency, and the countries had an opportunity to be exposed to the work of the European Space Agency and the benefits they can draw from using Earth observation technology. It's with great pleasure that I see and that I saw after that partnership that actually this MOU between the World Bank and the European Space Agency having come to fruition and signed in Paris, COP21, end of last year, to really engage with World Bank teams and the countries, the PPCR countries, in trying to assess how the Earth observation technology can be used in those countries which we are supporting. So with no further ado, this was just a way of introduction. I think this is going to be a very rich discussion. I'm particularly interested in the discussion because the key point in all of this discussions on technology is how can we support countries leapfrog the use of technologies, and this is a much needed area. You know, I mean, those of you who work in climate resilience and that know the status, the capacity, equipment, systems in place in many of the developing countries in terms of climate information systems, you will understand how critical this is. So I'm going to pass on to James. I was asked to provide a brief introduction to both James and Joseph. As I said, James is the director of climate change here at the World Bank. Basically, this team is a cost-cutting solutions area team, provides leadership across the World Bank group, covering policy tools and methodologies, climate finance and fund management, and disaster risk and resilience. He took on this position May of 2014, and prior to that, amongst many other things, he was the manager of the Public-Private Infrastructure Advisory Facility at the World Bank, but he's also was the head of corporate and private finance at Treasury in UK. Joseph Ashbacher, hopefully I'm pronouncing it somehow correctly, is the Director of Earth Observation Programs at the European Space Agency. He's Austrian, studied at the University of Innsbruck, graduated with a doctoral degree in natural sciences, has 35 years of professional experience in Earth observation. From 1994 to 2001, he worked at the European Commission Joint Research Center in Italy, where he was the scientific assistant to the director of the Space Applications Institute. In 2014, he was appointed as responsible for planning ESA's Earth observation programs and formulating and implementing programmatic and strategic decisions across the directorate. And since this year, he's the director of EO programs at ESA. James, I invite you now to give your introductory remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, Mafalda. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted here just to sort of frame this a little bit and looking forward to hearing some of the discussion before I head off. But it strikes me as though this is a very important issue, and I think it's also something of a zeitgeist, if you like. I was up in the United Nations General Assembly meeting for my sins last week, and Cantor has been working with the White House and others, I think, in the team to develop the declaration for accessing the data revolution for climate resilience. And we as an institution managed to sign that with a number of countries who can participate in this, both from the provision of the technology, but also the beneficiaries of the technology, in as much as they're some of the most vulnerable countries in the world to changes in the climate, and also to a number of really leading information and technology providers, as well as some NGOs. So, you know, we're really, I think this is a very exciting space that's recognizing the power of data and information and analytics to enable us to make better decisions around resilience and dealing with climate change. So this obviously, the whole Earth observation piece is one component of that data revolution. But the guy who's on one of the panels with me from the UK Met Office was talking about numbers that I'd never heard of, petabytes, I think, which is the enormous amounts of data that is made available every minute, apparently. The only reason why I was of particular interest was when I was at the Treasury in the UK, one of my responsibilities was to sign off a business case for the Cray supercomputers that the Met Office had, and I think Treasury officials were rather alarmed at this enormous cost that these Cray supercomputers had. So it was a little bit of a task to persuade them that the money was worthwhile. And I think, you know, a lot of what we've seen from climate data and the developments that have been made in that have really supported a different approach to building resilience. And I think, you know, just to frame it in the context of the World Bank Group, you know, anybody who's been asleep for the last year may have missed the 100 million number that we put out in Paris for the number of people that will fall back into poverty as a result of climate change. And at the same time, you know, we have to make sure that we can feed and sustain 9 billion people living on the planet by 2050, and that we'll have 2 billion new urban dwellers as well. And you know, we've got to build a whole different approach to resilience in terms of the way in which we do development work. And I think Paris the Paris Agreement put an emphasis on that in terms of the importance of adaptation and resilience, and we incorporated that into the Climate Change Action Plan that was agreed by the board earlier this year. And we have a commitment to increase our focus on adaptation and resilience across our lending portfolio, but also to think about transformation and how we make transformations in the way in which we do business. Now, some of these, I think, are fairly obvious from the mitigation perspective in terms of moving from coal to renewables, and you know, there's a huge amount of ambition as well on the urban side. But some of the enablers for this transformation are going to be the sorts of things that we're talking about today in terms of the kind of information and access to it that enables us to do things in a fundamentally different way. And I think, again, just to sort of reflect Mafalda's thoughts, the amount of return on investment that comes from effective use of this data is very, very significant. I mean, I think the EU METSAT was looking at benefits in the range of, you know, between 1 and 5 billion euros for the work that they're doing, and perhaps we can just look into that a little bit and see, you know, what other case studies we've got in terms of Europe and Central Asia, where return on investment can be between 4 and 8 times over a 7-year period. And I'm not sure what other sort of development interventions we can have that will give us such a great payback over a relatively short period of time. And I think the final point I'll make really is the collaboration that we've got with the European Space Agency. I think this is extremely a good potential for us both across the whole SD portfolio, but also in the climate change work that we're doing. And I think the Earth Observation for Development Initiative that was launched in 2008 helps us to provide the kind of information to World Bank operational teams and local stakeholders that give them access to information in a different way that they can use to really drive forward this whole resilience agenda. And a few sort of points that we've got over 32 technical activities that are supported by this, so that was news to me. Ranging from work in Lake Titicaca, where we can see the rate of degradation and the sinking size of the water facility there, and also a lot of work on hydrological and geological hazards across the world: Indonesia, Brazil, Vietnam, Egypt, Tunisia. And I think that we often come to Zambia when we talk about the PPCR. I think it's a very good example of best practice. But some of the data collection around small wastewater reservoirs, I think, is very interesting there. So this is a fascinating topic, and I think it's a very relevant one. And I think we've got a really good agenda lined up. So I can be here for the next sort of half an hour or so, but then I've got to head off. But I think I will conclude there and pass it over to you, Mafalda.
Thank you very much, James. Because we are slightly behind schedule, let's move on already to Joseph Aschbacher. Please go ahead with your introductory remarks.
Okay. No, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you also, James, for the introduction and also for the mentioning of some of the work we are doing also at the European Space Agency. In fact, I'm linked here from Mexico, from Guadalajara, where the International Astronautical Congress takes place, which is the biggest gathering of space agencies every year, and happens to be in Mexico this time, and where all the space agencies and heads of space agencies are here. This morning we had a very interesting session on space and climate, and the leaders of ESA, NASA, JAXA, the Chinese Space Agency, the CNES, the French Space Agency, German Space Agency, they were all reaffirming their need to fully use space technology and Earth observation in particular for climate change issues. Of course, triggered by COP21, new commitments are required, new observations are required, and much of this can be done from satellites, and many of the nations around the world have excellent capabilities really to address this issue. You probably know that out of these 50 climate change variables, or they're called global, the essential climate variables, about half of them can be monitored from space, or mostly from space only, which really shows that space and climate is working closely together, but it's also really needing each other. Of course, on climate, you would talk about global data to solve global problems, and here the uniqueness really of Earth observation with a neutral perspective, comparable information, comparable over time and over different geographic areas and countries, is of course essential in order to really help in better understanding the system, our planet Earth, and how the atmosphere, the land and the oceans are really working together. In Europe, we have been quite active in this domain, not only politically with the Paris Agreement and also the other climate activities, but also technically. And
Go ahead, Joseph. We just had a little bit of music in between. Go ahead.
Music is always welcome. No, I was saying in Europe we have invested quite significantly in better understanding planet Earth, and much of it related to climate. There's one program called Copernicus, which may be known to some of you, which has really been built up closely between the European Commission, European Union, and ESA, the European Space Agency, to build up a global monitoring system for various parameters of the Earth. Much of it is related to environment and climate, and we are building up a constellation of 20 sentinels, as they are called, sentinel satellites. Some of them are instruments and other satellites, but 15 of them are self-standing satellites. We have launched 4 of them so far, and once the system will be ready, which is in a couple of years, it really will be, I would say, one of the best global observing systems in the world to provide the data from the planet. I think the interesting part, especially for developing countries, but not only, is that all the data which are acquired by the sentinels are free and open. So anyone can log in on a website, can get these data for free, which is quite a change compared to past habits, where satellite data have been either difficult to get or expensive. But we really have been fighting also internally to have a free and open data policy, which I think is critical for many applications, especially in developing countries. So Europe has been or is investing, or has so far invested about 8 billion euros in building up this system. But of course, this will be a constant monitoring system that will go on for decades, and therefore I think the guarantee to have long time series data that can be compared is quite important for climate resilience, climate studies in general. I think another point which I really would like to highlight is the partnership we are building up with the World Bank. With the World Bank group, we have signed an agreement during COP21 in Paris, and which is building on a very long cooperation which we have already been running since 2011, actually, where we have been funding something close to 30 smaller scale projects. And I see Steve Coulson also online, who is in charge of implementing these activities, which have been extremely successful and very well liked by the community internationally. They are addressing issues like water, urban areas, risks, disaster risks, energy, and similar environmental aspects. And now we are about to scale up this activity. We are launching some larger projects already being initiated on urban and water and rural development. And at the moment, we are also preparing a proposal for our ministers to be accepted in December, where we have what we call the Earth Observation Envelope Program, where we also include quite a significant element for cooperation with the World Bank in particular and international financing institutions, especially on issues related to climate, to sustainable development, and including sustainable development goals. So I think there we are very happy to be part of this group and this partnership. With the World Bank, it has always been excellent to work together, and can only appreciate what was said before by James, but that we are very eager to provide our tools, our technology to the best use of people in order to cope with some of the global problems which we have. Of course, we also work on capacity building. I mean, this webinar is one example, but we also are working with the World Bank, but also with other partners to really spread the message. And Pierre-Philippe Mathieu is very active in this part from ESA to really make sure that the use of Earth observation and the potential is widely understood and is well used. So I think with these few words, I really would like to hand over to the experts to thank you all for this opportunity, to really thank the World Bank again for this partnership, which I think is flourishing extremely nicely and well. And you have my full commitment, our full commitment on the side of ESA, and I'm really looking forward to this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Let me thank on my behalf and James' behalf for your words. And I think, James laid out the importance of this type of enablers and information and technology in terms of supporting transformation. And let us not forget that if we are to meet the Paris Agreement targets and objectives, what we need in these economies and these countries is transformation, and rather rapid transformation. He also laid out the point which is important, and I think it's one that where World Bank and others are putting a lot of emphasis on in raising awareness and demonstrating to client countries the returns on this type of investment. And it's actually great to know from Joseph that a lot of the data that is useful for economic agents and decision makers in developing world can and is monitored already from space and can be made available to them freely, which is excellent. And hearing about this new initiative from the European Space Agency, I think it's great to know and to keep monitoring. With that, I'm going to invite Kanta now to make her presentation. Kanta is the lead environmental specialist here at the World Bank, very solid and wide experience in natural resources management, environment management, and climate change adaptation. She joined the World Bank in 2004, currently works in the climate change group on climate policy, knowledge management, and tools development. She also co-led the bank's engagement with the Potsdam Institute of Climate Research in developing the flagship Send Down the Heat report. James alluded to the outcome of one of these reports and the fact some of the data in terms of impact on poverty numbers that might be expected if no sufficient climate action is taken. She also works in development of screening tools and climate services to mainstream disaster risk as part of large mainstreaming efforts. She's also leading at the moment a study focused on the nexus between climate, migration, and resilience. And as I've mentioned before, she's the World Bank focal point for the PPCR. Kanta is going to entice us further. She'll be speaking a little bit about the role of Earth observation in providing cutting-edge solutions and how developing countries can benefit from these tools and technologies and capacity, and also about the special module on Earth observation within the e-learning course of the World Bank on climate services. Kanta, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mafalda. Thank you, James, and thank you, Joseph, and thank you all for being here. What I'm going to do is been made a little bit easier by Mafalda, but what I wanted to do was to convey to you how the PPCR program is working with the European Space Agency, but within the larger context of really setting up these countries to be climate resilient in the medium to long term. So very quickly, I think you've already heard that the overarching objective of the PPCR is really to integrate climate resilience into the core development plan. And this is to do it for transformation at scale. And if we really want to do that, I think there are multiple ways to do it, but one important part, as we've heard from all the introductions, is information, data is really important, and how we really work with countries to harness that. The program is working in 18 countries and has $1.3 billion. Mafalda mentioned already how a large part of the first round of countries was really looking at this issue of hydromet and climate services. What is interesting is that of the 18 countries, almost all of them identified the importance of hydromet and climate agencies. But what was that takeaway that we got from this first round of PPCR countries was that while each of them identified this area of work, a lot of them really focused on the hardware. They focused on the hardware and the installation of this hydromet equipment, and less on how do we, use that data to generate useful information together with other sources of data like satellite data, and really generate that into useful climate services or products. whether it is to help urban flooding or agro-meteorological data or early warning systems. And there was a recognition also that there was really a lack of complete, I think, understanding of what that meant in terms of taking it from data to information services. And alongside with the program, the PPCR team, and I want to recognize Anna and Kazi and Luis Kronberg online and various other colleagues, we've been working to put together this e-platform, and we will give you a quick view of it today. But what I think we've also taken to the second round of countries that Mafalda mentioned is we're working with 10 new countries. And I think what we just heard from everybody is exactly the strategic approach we're trying to take to the second set of countries. We don't just want them to identify individual investments on these issues. We want them to really transform their enabling environment, so that their institutional structures and the information architecture is such that it can really absorb the kind of data that Joseph was referring to. I mean, there will be a big gap between what is being generated out there and the countries that need it most if we don't help them to put that enabling context. So in this second round of the PPCR, and I'm very happy to see RSC here, Ross here, and various other colleagues who are actually working in these countries, to see that how we're taking a much more proactive engagement on this. And we've done really three things at three different levels to make sure that this will happen and to see this seeds of, making sure it happens. The first is, I think, the proactive engagement with the GPs who've led this conversation and put the climate information, climate services as a center stage of the 1.5 million TA that countries are getting. And to elevate that conversation to recognize that you really need to embed this as a strategic pillar. And we've gone one step further is in partnership with the Hydromet Climate Services and Resilience Community of Practice in the bank, we've been working so that each of these teams who are working in this individual country don't really have to sort of reinvent the wheel. We've sort of come up with these generic terms of reference that can guide that work in the country, making those terms of reference a more comprehensive set of issues that can still be tailored for the countries as they work on their program, but through that community of practice that already exists within the bank, that we can come back to them for expert advice, peer advice, cross-support, and really harness that broad-based partnership using the best of the expertise we have within the institution, but also beyond. The third is, I think, with the particular appeal of the use of satellite data that is able to provide systematic, timely, as well as time series information and data sets. We've set up this partnership with ESA, who would then be able to accompany some of the teams in some of the countries, and we can come back to that in the conversation, to really work with the countries upstream on building their capacity, coming up with what their requirements are, and then hopefully systematically working on those through the investment plans that will come up with the countries. And I think you will hear from Andy and Ross as a discussant on this. So really, I think what we've done in the second round is much more proactive engagement, recognizing that what the teams need and the clients need is very specific and hands-on technical advice and customized support. And all of this needs patience, right? I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but we are starting a journey with these countries and hopefully a broader suite of countries that we would be willing to work with. And the only thing I would add is I think one big difference between this part of the partnership with ESA and the broader based one in the bank is this really puts the countries at the focus. We are working through the modality of the countries to really put that larger institutional and architectural arrangement. So one important part, I think, of all of this is that it's really important to fill that capacity gap that exists. And this capacity gap on how you sort of really begin to embed use information and data to be useful to take adaptation forward, I think, to what James was saying. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to move adaptation forward. It's not just at the margins. It's not just incremental. We need to transform the way we do it. And one of the findings of the shock-based report was that to keep these people out of poverty, we need climate-informed decision-making. And that doesn't just come up to talk. It really means you need to have customized products and services. And we found that there is a gap not just with the client countries, but even within the institution on what it really means to understand this issue. So we've been working over the last few years with support from the SIF as well on this e-learning course, and we've just about finished it, and we'll be able to show it to you online afterwards. But really what we have is a landing page that has these various modules, which start with really, and there are 4 or 5 modules, and one of them is a dedicated module where we have a special module we had worked with ESA to develop on the use of satellite Earth observation for climate services. So, we have modules, and I will just run through them very quickly in the interest of time. The first module really is why are climate services important? What do we need to know about? But really, how do we actually get to design them? And we use a value chain approach to sort of really the outcome being climate resilient development. You can have the best data. If a country can't translate that data into information on a shared basis, it's going to sit in silos. But even when they have this data, there are gaps in the data, and bringing other sources of data is extremely important, and hence where we are using some of the satellite data and other sources of data. But the important lesson here is also the inclusive working with all of the user community. And when you look at this, what this course does is actually disaggregate how you can come into it. If you are a water specialist, what are the kind of products you need? If you're an agriculture specialist, what are the products you need? And really you can see climate services touch on every sector, every thematic issue, and really relate to us from our weather forecast on a daily basis or early warning systems, and really the insurance that we put on our houses in terms of understanding. So as we go through the course, you will get a sense of what are the short-term products, the medium-term products, and the long-term products. And the idea of going through this is that when you actually get to designing your project, and we actually have a whole dedicated module on how you take that kind of information and training into the design of your project. So when the review was done by Vladimir Sirkunov and others in the bank, we basically recognized that there are those projects which are dedicated hydromet type projects. And what you would need, the kind of information is very different from if you were a water specialist and you were doing a water project. What is it that you can do to enhance the use of systematically climate services within your investment? And we work through those examples. I won't go into the special module. I think that's going to be dealt with by Andy. But really, I just want to leave us with some key messages that if we're really serious about building resilience within the context of climate change for the larger development goals, we need to go beyond the climate talk to really manage those risks. And we cannot manage those risks unless we use, sound, timely, quality data in an inclusive manner, understanding the needs of the communities or the stakeholders, and embed them into our projects and programs. And this must be customized. It's not some product, which is why adaptation always continues to be more difficult. You need to customize it to that local user and to that local need, and based on data scarce or data-rich countries, and to some extent, EU can help us, but at the end of the day, we need to come up with those customized products. And we have to work in partnership across our own institution with the service providers and users to make it happen. So, I mean, that's all I want to say, and thank you very much. I don't know if, while we get Andy on the line, I probably will not go to the website because I think it's going to take up more time, but maybe just turn to Andy, and then we can, in the end, I can just show you the website for those who are interested. We hope to launch it very soon. I mean, this is the set of modules that you can go through, and on the side menu bar here, each module has certain lessons. We will offer this through our Learning Institute in the bank, so our client countries can take it as much as our task team. So that's all I have to say, Mafalda.
So thank you very much, Beth. Another free knowledge tool. We had already heard from Joseph about all of that data that is already available, free, and more so will come. And now this e-learning course as well that will be open and free for people to learn more about this, this important topic. So let's continue.
Okay.
We will now have Andy Dean. Andy is a senior remote sensing specialist with Hatfield Consultants. He has more than 15 years of experience helping companies and organizations to evaluate and integrate remote sensing and geographic information systems technologies for improved environmental monitoring and management. He has worked in different sectors: energy, water, biodiversity conservation, in development of strategies and plans to adopt remote sensing technology. Very much focused on training and capacity development, something that we've been emphasizing during this session. He has worked across the world as well: Africa, Southeast Asia, North America, and Europe, for a variety of clients, including World Bank, IDB, ADB, and United Nations agencies, and European Space Agency. So Andy, please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so sorry if I step in here, but just wanted to apologize because I have to leave for another meeting. So I do thank you all and wish you good luck with this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and all the best with your space agency's meeting in Mexico.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Okay, Andy, please go ahead. I think you are going to give us a little bit of a perspective of the work that you are envisaging or already undertaking with some of the task teams and clients that PPCR is supporting and World Bank is supporting on how best Earth observation can be a part of their project design and implementation. We look forward to hearing from you. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mafalda. Are you going to give me the presentation right, Dominic, to show my presentation?
I've just done so, Andy. Feel free to share your screen, please.
Okay, thanks. Okay, everyone can see this?
Yes, please go ahead, and we
Great.
can see you.
Great. So thanks, Mafalda, and thanks, Kanta. So in my presentation, I want to specifically address how satellite Earth observation data and information can be beneficial to the pilot program for climate resilience, and also just refer to how World Bank staff can obtain some inputs from satellite Earth observation experts to help with their program planning. So I think as Joseph introduced, it really is an interesting and exciting time for satellite Earth observation. The Sentinel program that Joseph mentioned really is a revolutionary constellation of Earth observation satellites. And it's going to provide a sustainable supply of free and open data, optical and radar data sets that are complementary, across a range of spatial resolutions, and including a high-resolution 10-meter resolution Sentinel-2 satellite that's already operational. These satellites provide a combination of wide area coverage of the planet and frequent repeat coverage. And it's investments such as the Copernicus program and the Sentinel missions that really do give us new opportunities, we believe, for improving climate services and monitoring. And I think it's important to note that we're talking about a partnership with ESA, but we all recognize that the Sentinels also complement a range of existing missions and investments such as Landsat 8. And that's something that certainly ESA and the World Bank recognize. As an example of this high revisit frequency, Here's a very recent image of the island of Madeira, the Portuguese island. And this is a false color image, so vegetation is showing in bright red, so you can see the vegetation of the island. And just 10 days later, the Sentinel-2 satellite revisited this location, and we were able to obtain this image of the extent of forest fires that affected a large part of the island during mid-August. So a real example of the high revisit frequency and the potential for monitoring the landscape. I think, as James noted in the introduction, and Kanta as well, that we do recognize that satellite Earth observation is one data set that is an important component of climate information services. So as a complementary and important data set, we might just review what is it that makes satellite Earth observation of special interest. One of the aspects that I've already mentioned is this provision of consistent long-term observations of the land and coastal and ocean environments on a frequent basis, on time frames ranging from a few hours for the meteorological satellites to weekly and monthly, depending on the systems. And in this graphic here, just to illustrate the huge coverage that one swath or orbit of Sentinel-2 can cover, 290 kilometers over Italy. So wide area, consistent data quality. Satellite Earth observation as a complementary tool can help to fill gaps, spatial and temporal gaps, in other observations such as ground-based observations. So here's an example of the Doppler radar coverage over mainland China in 2013. And again, you can see that if you leverage the global precipitation missions, meteorological satellites, you can fill spatial and temporal gaps that may exist in other observing systems. Satellite Earth observation has a unique long-term record in many cases that are stored and they are accessible and freely available. So this time series does enable the reconstruction of climate information, even where in situ information or measurements were not originally gathered or have these temporal gaps. So this is an example of the Landsat historical record going back from 1972. And I think what we have now is a really exciting scenario where we've got Sentinel-2 and Landsat-8 and the other Sentinel missions putting together an even more impressive time series that will serve the climate information community very well into the future as well. We already heard the scale of the investments that have been made in some of this Earth observation acquisition and processing infrastructure. And for PPCR countries and many countries around the world, this provides an opportunity to leverage investments that have been made by other countries and to invest in knowledge and not in infrastructure, but more in data acquisition and in processing. So not as significant investments are required in infrastructure. So, for example, PPCR countries could follow a similar approach to Australia as a demonstration, perhaps, that Australia's followed the European Union and set up its own Copernicus program to take advantage of the Sentinel data sets that are now available. So just an example of taking and building on investments that that Europe and other countries, many other space agencies are making. So having given that brief introduction to the special case for satellite Earth observation, I do want to touch on what we've included in the e-learning module that's close to finalization. What we've done is we've structured how satellite Earth observation can contribute to the pilot program for climate resilience and climate impact in climate impact areas. And I'm going to give a couple of quick examples of two areas now. In flooding, you might ask, what can satellite Earth observation provide when it comes to flooding? And its products and information such as elevation and drainage networks, building a history for disaster risk reduction of flood impacts, flood extent, disaster response, so rapid processing of satellite data to produce flood information, slope stability, land subsidence, which can be an important issue for flooding in urban areas. So here's a quick example. This is a radar image from Sentinel-1 of the Caprivi area of Namibia. And through rapid processing, this radar image can be turned into a flood extent map, which can provide information to those who are planning a response to such events. In the second example, habitat and biodiversity loss, what can Earth observation provide? I think we're all familiar with land cover, land use type map products, vegetation productivity assessments, fragmentation, connectivity type analysis, and trying to turn land cover and land use information into habitat quality assessments for key groups of species. A quick example from Garamba National Park in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've got the ability here to pick out some of the key habitats that are relevant to the incredible biodiversity in Garamba, and to identify also the burn scars in some of the savanna habitats. And using some processing, we can produce a thematic map that's of high quality. And I think the message here is that if we invest in these kinds of products early in a program, they provide a really important foundation that can lead to significant benefits downstream as a program continues. So turning now to how Earth observation can be integrated into the strategic program for climate resilience that are being developed in many countries, especially the 10 new PPCR countries. And I think that a lot of task team leaders or climate change practitioners may have questions around what is the best use or approach to using Earth observation. How can it be used in our priority sectors? How can it extend existing services? We want to build on what's done in the past. How do we do that? We've got existing programs and investments. And what kind of capacity building and training is required? So the World Bank and ESA are collaborating to provide available EO expertise, Earth observation expertise, which could be used to contribute to joint missions, and also to help to establish these requirements and design approaches for Earth observation to support SPCR investments. So I won't go into the details here, but for example, we're starting that process with Malawi. We can identify through desktop review and interviews some of the priority areas, and then we can start to consider where potential EO inputs could be made and could be beneficial and complementary to other approaches. The same thing with Uganda, there's obviously different priority areas and more of an emphasis on forestry, but a joint mission is scheduled next month, the middle of next month, for Uganda as part of this Earth observation expert assistance. So in these joint missions, the PPCR countries have available Earth observation experts to join a mission to liaise and consult with government and other organizations in country, make presentations, do some demonstrations hands-on of products for the country, and to really try to help to begin the process to design EO contribution. And then finally, that type of information would be taken and turned into country-specific requirements and opportunities and country-specific specifications to really help a successful implementation of satellite Earth observation as part of the SPCR. So with that, I will conclude just with the contacts that the people, the names that you're already familiar with and been introduced to, that you can contact to begin the process to engage with some of these EO experts.
Thank you very much, Andy. That was a very thought-provoking, stimulating presentation. I have already a number of questions, but I'm going to contain myself. But I think certainly, I think a lot of people will be interested in understanding. I mean, you flagged very briefly the examples and the work that can be done in a couple of areas, flooding and biodiversity. And I guess a lot of additional information will be available in the e-learning course as well, so that everybody can go deeper and try to understand the practical use of Earth observation data in their projects and programs, or the projects and programs they are designing with the countries. So a number of very interesting points. Kanta on there's data, there's need on the use, on the end user, how critical to work on the enabling environment, and how we facilitate bringing these things together. Very interesting points there, and that we basically have to understand the importance of the value chain approach to climate services. And now, Andy, in terms of looking at the practical implications or applications of these data and how they are relevant for the investments that World Bank teams are engaged with. Let me now move on before we go into the general Q&A session. I'm sure that a lot of people will have a number of questions. I myself have already some. But before we do that, let me go to the discussants. The first discussant will be Pierre-Philippe Mathieu, and we now have Ross with us. So he will be the second discussant. Welcome, Ross. Just very briefly in terms of Pierre-Philippe Mathieu, he's an Earth observation data scientist at the European Space Agency, and he works in a very beautiful location, Italy, Frascati, Italy. He spent more than 20 years working in the field of environmental and ocean modeling, weather risk management, and remote sensing. He holds degrees in mechanical engineering and an MSc from University of Liège in Belgium, and a PhD in oceanography from the University of Louvain in Belgium as well, and another management degree from University of Reading Business School. And I can tell you that you have some people in the room here, which I know, who are very close to this topic of oceanography and very, very interested in ocean modeling. So even if you don't hear from them in this event, I'm certain that you will hear from them after the event. Yes, Philippe, go ahead.
Okay, many thanks, Mafalda. I'm not sure what the discussant has to say exactly, but I can make a few comments if you want of what I've heard so far. I'm actually sitting in the room of my daughters here in beautiful Italy, and as you will see in one of the talk, which is linked to this invitation, the way they see the business I'm in is just doing a selfie from space. this is the new generation, the digital native, so they don't make any difference between a picture they take on their phone and one that comes from space. And this is actually the ultimate goal. It's that the infrastructure is totally transparent and that you can merge seamlessly a different type of data, maybe in your phone, if everybody has one these days. But this is not easy, as you know. We've been talking a lot with the World Bank, but still we didn't bridge the last mile before the end user. That requires an investment, and I think the Hydromet office is the perfect element to bring the data to the last mile. So I'm really happy if we could co-align forces so that we build infrastructure, IT, also data infrastructure that enables these Hydromet offices to get the data, but also the information on top of it. So bringing software to them, bringing exploitation platform, as we call them, so that they can basically use the products, and also along with the capacity building. So one effort has been made with the e-module. We are now also targeting massive people with massive open online course, MOOC. There is a link to a recent MOOC on optical vision from space in the invitation. I invite you to register. We invited Sheila from the Open Learning Campus last week to give a talk at our conference, and there were good discussion about how to build together different modules to spread the word towards developing countries about how to use this data. There is currently a MOOC on climate proofing, so we want to develop methodologies as well on how this data can be transformed into indicators that resonates with countries, that feed into the sustainable development goals. So there is a lot of research also underpinning this, so that you can easily compare indicators from one country to the other. And we tried this with Quentin, and we had massive problems also with Anna, because economists talking to scientists had different ways of averaging data, etc. So there is a lot of dialogue to be done before we reach something that can actually be actionable by different countries. And that's why this partnership is very important. We are targeting different aspects, infrastructure, data, and capacity building. And we are working at the country level. Hatfield is basically going on joint mission to make that happen, so that the countries speak our language and we speak their language, so we can develop a common language, basically. And this is part of a bigger picture about different trends and thematics in the World Bank. And maybe Steve Coulson, if he's online, could say a few words about this, if it's okay for you.
Yes.
Is Steve online?
I'm online, Pierre-Philippe, and
okay.
Your beautiful curtains in your child's room.
Okay, you can come here. I can give it to you if you want. So, do you want to say a few words?
I can just say a few words. Yeah, I mean, you said we haven't gone the last mile so far, but actually that's been by design. I have to put things in context. We go one step at a time. So the work that we've done so far with the World Bank and with the other multilateral development banks has been actually targeted towards small-scale demonstrations. And most of the effort has been put into the production and delivery of information from satellites. Very little of the effort on our side was put into capacity building and actually working with the users, both within the bank and the client states, in order to integrate this information into what they do. That was simply a matter of fact. That's what we put the first emphasis on. What I can say now is those activities have served their purpose. They've raised the interest both in the bank and in the client states, and we are now in a position to scale up, to do significantly larger activities, and now throw a lot more resources into these areas and actually address, we would hope, together with the bank, but address the issue of capacity building in the client states in order to use this information. So we're ready to go. We are making a proposition to our member states in 2 months' time at the ministerial to find significant additional resources. We're fairly confident we're going to get those resources, and earlier you saw the full commitment of our director to work along these lines. So we're looking forward to really scaling up a longer-term perspective over the next 3 to 5 years, and working more closely with the World Bank over a number of areas, including climate resilience and proofing. So very much looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Let me just say, for those of you here and online, Stephen Coulson is the head of industries at the European Space Agency. Thank you for those remarks as well. It's actually made a good point that I also had taken and noted here in my paper. I guess one can look at this work in 2 ways: is delivery of data, and that can sort of shape the program or project design, and decision making in the country in terms of how to prioritize investments. And obviously, you know, I can understand having prioritized that approach because of something that I alluded to earlier, the need to raise awareness of the importance of these types of investments and the returns on these types of investments. To then take it to the next level, which is something that for us in PPCR we are always very keen in emphasizing, which is how do we build the capacity in country? How do we make sure that now the systems in country are capable, the point that Santa was also alluding to before, the enabling environment. How do we make sure that there's capacity, there's understanding, there's a mechanism in country to take on that agenda themselves and use it as part of their planning, development planning, delivery processes, conceptualizing them and delivery and overall decision-making processes. So I can see that sequence playing out, and I can see the importance of getting to the next stage, which is really making sure that the countries embrace this agenda and that we contribute to the capacity in country. And we look forward, we are certain that you will succeed in getting the additional funding, and look forward to hearing about the outcome of those discussions with the ministers. Now, for our last discussant, Ross. Ross he will bring a very client-driven perspective. He's a senior climate change specialist here at the World Bank with more than 20 years experience working on climate change, biodiversity conservation, environmental management, worked and managed many investments across different regions, Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America. And I know that he was very closely engaged in the PPCR Mozambique program. I don't know if that's the perspective that he will bring today or a broader perspective. He works across natural resources management, forest, biodiversity, water resources, livelihoods, and climate change, and has long experience in design and management of program and policy support across government, donor, and NGO sectors. He, in addition from working right now in the World Bank, has also worked with the Global Environment Facility, the UK DFID, Department for International Development, ADB, and UNDP. Ross, please.
What an introduction. Thank you. Was that me? Well, thank you very much. I mean, just really to firstly say that this has been a really, for me at least, a very interesting and invigorating session, because the potential for these Earth observation systems to inform the types of work we're doing at field level with the countries is tremendous. Actually, most of my remarks when I'm thinking about this actually are in relation to the work we're doing at the moment in Malawi and Uganda. So these are the you know, these sort of entrant countries, second-round entrant countries. Mozambique now is a bit more advanced, and the investments are ongoing. In fact, we're about to close one of the, I think it's the first PPCR project to close in later on next month. So, yeah, so I think there's a lot of really interesting issues coming up here, and I can't really comment on the actual technical side of things. I know less about Earth observation systems than anyone in this room, and certainly far less than anyone on the other end of the line there. But I'm thinking about this in relation to how our clients in country can access these services and use them. And the first issue really came up in that earlier presentation from, I think it was Joseph, when he was talking about the Copernicus and the possibilities of making data freely available. And that, of course, is wonderful and something the bank has been promoting for quite some time. The challenge, though, I think, is on the capacity side. How do our clients access that data and make use of it in an effective way? You can provide as much data and information as you can throw at most of our clients, but if the capacity is not there to actually make full use of that, it's not going to really take things forward. So I think what we need to start doing in parts of our task teams is to really think about how we can work with you know, governments of Malawi and Uganda, others, to try and help develop capacities, develop technological capabilities to actually make the most of that. And perhaps before that also think about really what they need this data for exactly within the context of those particular countries. So we're beginning to have those sorts of discussions. We're at a very early stage with engaging the European Space Agency in Hatfield with Uganda and Malawi, but we're planning, as Andy just mentioned, to bring the Hatfield team in with an upcoming mission in Uganda. We're at preparation stage at the moment to really introduce the range of possibilities that Earth observation could bring to Uganda, to sort of put a menu of options on the table for our clients, and then to start having a discussion about where this might fit in the evolving SPCR program, and of course going forward towards DCS as well. And also for other work, most of my work actually is on forests and sort of fit, SCPS and so forth. So, you know, how does it fit there as well, and can we access these sorts of services? So we're bringing those in, and then Malawi will come along the lines, and there's lots of potential opportunities for Malawi. And as we're at an earlier stage yet, we haven't really kicked off the PPCR preparation process at a substantive level yet. We'll have a better chance to kind of integrate ESA and Hatfield into the work. So the first thing, yeah, is on that whole issue of capacity building, and I was very happy to hear these various comments around the table on the focus there. That's going to be needed. From a user point of view, I think we need to think internally within the bank and across the agencies about how we make, what will be the model of engagement after these initial kind of introductory sessions when, you know, Hatfield and ESA come out and we have these shows and tells and these discussions, and no doubt will go very well. But then what happens next? How do we integrate that relationship? How do we facilitate that relationship and then fund it so that it takes on a sort of longer-term meaning? Because that's how capacity is going to be built in the longer term. And, you know, after PPCR is gone and all the rest of it, we need to think about those sorts of longer-term institutional linkages. So hopefully these introductory sessions will give us a chance, but I think inside the bank we need to think about that a bit as well. I made the point already that we should be not thinking just about PPCR. I think the work that PPCR have done here to get this whole platform going is fantastic. But what about SIP? What about SCPS? Can we join this relationship up? In Uganda, we're trying to bring forward the FIP and the PPCR together and jointly co-fund projects together on climate resilient landscapes and the like. So can we bring the different sort of aspects together and beyond forestry, there's urban and infrastructure and all the rest of it. So we need to think a bit more broadly like that as well. So that's it, really. I mean, I think we're looking forward to moving ahead on this. I had some specific questions, one of which was whether I saw, I think, Andy, in your your presentation, you showed a slide about Doppler weather radar in China and how Earth observation systems could help fill the gap. Now, of course, Doppler weather radars are incredibly expensive to install, and a number of our clients keep asking us, can you pay for another Doppler weather radar, because they are so important and useful. Do EO systems provide an opportunity to substitute for Doppler weather radar systems? Can we actually get around that? In Malawi, we've been asked by the government to help them identify leapfrog technologies that help, avoid costs and sort of approaches and technologies that have been less than successful in the past, and leapfrog ahead to more cost-effective approaches, of which Earth observations, of course, is one of them. They're also asking for Doppler weather radars. So, is this a replacement? So that's a kind of specific question I have for you. There was another one. Yeah, I mean, just internally, how do we access? I mean, is this, after the initial show and tell at the country level, do the TUF teams need to then ensure that this is built into the investment plans? Does the European Space Agency have resources to bring to the table in terms of applications and taking this forward as well? Those are questions I have. They're open questions, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Very good, Ross. Thank you very much. Already 2 questions on the table. Maybe the first one for Andy and the second one for Kanta. And I'm going to reserve mine for later. But we are going to open up here in the room and WebEx. So let's stick around here in the room, and then we go to WebEx to see if there are virtual questions, and then we'll go around to the speakers and the discussants. If you just please, when you do raise the question, introduce yourself. Please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Arti Bele. I work in the South Asia program on hydromet, climate services, and resilience. And we have a number of projects. One active in Nepal, one approved recently in Bangladesh, one approved now in Bhutan, and a couple more in the pipeline. And we have a whole pipeline and ongoing technical studies and capacity building. I wanted to get to that point because Kanta touched upon the informational architecture, which I think is a very critical issue. And I was then encouraged to hear about Stephen's comment on capacity building. But one of the things we are seeing on the ground is there's been quite a bit of investment sporadically in a number of countries on hydromet. They've all sort of a number of them have come from donor countries, bilateral partners, and the observation network itself is disaggregated. And so it's not just data that is disaggregated, the network itself is disaggregated institutionally. So you'll find the water ministry having its own hydrology, the weather services having its own AWS and radar and hydrology. You'll have different agencies and institutions. Urban, water and sanitation institutions will have their own monitoring networks, and none of them really speak to each other. That's one layer of complexity. The second layer of complexity is when bilaterals sometimes provide very quickly and nicely, they give these Doppler weather radars, which you're talking about, but then the data doesn't reside with the country, the data doesn't speak to their system. So very often these countries have no access to that information, which can help them directly. So you have all this disaggregation in the network, you have disaggregation in the data, and then you have this treasure trove of Earth observation systems. And what, in such a data scarce environment as some of these countries, like in South Asia, what we would ideally like to do is identify what are the specific practical tools, like the software programs that can actually speak to these various information sets and bring them together in a coherent way. And then simultaneously, as our programs are building capacity in these countries, this can then just become those leapfrog technologies. They can then answer to development of services. But till we do this, we can't really get anywhere unless we then, what countries will do as a workaround is say, oh, give us 50 new all-weather, AWSs, or 500 new AWSs, or 3 Doppler radars. Give us new stuff because they've sort of just abandoned or given up on whatever they have. So that's the big challenge, I think, very practically on the ground.
Excellent point. Thank you very much. Other questions here in the room? Yes, Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, Rachel Allen. I am the coordinator for the PPCR at the CIF. Pierre, it's really good to hear your voice again. We took the PPCR participants to the actual observatory to see the Copernicus 2 years ago, and a lot of them are actually still talking about it when we do speak. One of the things, coming from a developing country, of course, also one of the issues that I have seen myself is that the need for, first of all, even getting governments, I was an advisor to the Minister of Climate Change, is to even understand the importance of this. So before even going down to the agencies themselves, the very ministers and persons who have the ability to say this should be done, don't even understand the importance and the need of the climate services. Secondly, just to follow up on that, on the point that you made is the equipment, the scale in terms of the PPCR countries, the scale of need in terms, starting with equipment. Some of it, if you look at, for example, Tajikistan or Kyrgyz Republic, there was nothing there. And you go to like a Jamaica, where the climate services unit, because it's coming out of the University of the West Indies, is very well developed. They've been working with the Met Office, and this has now been developed. But in terms of, again, enabling the full spectrum of climate services within a country, starting with the ministers and the decision makers to understand the need, right down to the very fishermen who, you talk about oceans, Mafalda laughs because she knows that's where I'm going with this. That's something that the SIDS have said for climate services is a huge gap. There is nothing on ocean acidification, there's nothing on sea temperature increase and climate change, sea temperature increase with bleaching. And there are huge impacts and implications on something like, for example, CONC, which is 2% of a GDP of a country. And when you're doing negotiations with like the IMF, climate services and data is no longer a priority, or invested in infrastructure, or that's not a priority. So how is it that we create this enabling environment and educate the full gamut of the spectrum going forward, from the ministers right down to the users in terms of the fisher folk, for example?
Okay, very good, Rachel. Thank you. Is there any question online, WebEx?
Currently not. No, but we can ask. You've got the possibility to ask a question now directly through your audio line if you want.
Is there anybody online that, through WebEx, that would like to raise a question or make some comments?
Just unmute yourself.
Okay. For the time being, we are not hearing, so why don't we have a first round? Questions that, so Ross raised a couple of questions. One was, which also brings me to a question I had earlier on. While we heard Joseph say that there's a lot of free data available already, there will be more through the Copernicus program. When we heard Andy, we also saw there that now it's important to invest in data acquisition. So can you explain to us what is this difference between data being available freely and this dimension of need to invest in data acquisition and processing? Somehow it links to Ross's point, because he also said these Doppler radars are very expensive. So can the Earth observation data substitute for those? And countries basically use that data that is already available without having to incur these, making these expensive investments. And then another question, maybe Kanta and others here on internally, how do we make sure that that there's that long-lasting engagement and impact at the country level? You mentioned some concrete constraints. One, and that's why, you know, I think it brings back to the point that Kanta was also making earlier, the importance of the enabling environment. So this issue, how can this partnership and the engagement of the World Bank help address this fragmented institutional setup, and what could be the role of this partnership and the role of the World Bank, and this disaggregation of institutions, disaggregation of data. I guess that could be tackled by, so Joseph is gone, so maybe it will be Andy and Pierre-Philippe. And then I think there's a point here, again, the value chain point from Rachel. Any thoughts on, you know, how do we raise awareness at the different levels and have sort of comprehensive interventions? I cannot say whether or not there's data on ocean acidification from EO and temperature increase, so maybe there Andy or Pierre-Philippe can also say something to that effect. So why don't I start with Andy, and then I'll go on to Pierre-Philippe and after Kanta in the room. Andy?
Thanks. I'll address the couple of the questions and then let someone else take over the Doppler weather radar and the data processing, data acquisition question. I think with regards to the Doppler weather radar, I think, you know, it really requires a little bit more discussion, but really, I think satellites, weather satellites, they can't necessarily replace Doppler radar. I mean, Doppler radar, they provide the ability to detect much higher quality local precipitation information, intensity, and the motion of events. But I guess the question I might ask is whether the countries that are interested in spending a lot of money on Doppler radar infrastructure are making the best use already of weather satellites, so the geostationary satellites that might be available and the polar orbiting satellite information. So, you know, before making a significant investment, are you using the best available information from weather satellites? Just to come back to that other question around, there's a lot of data availability, and is there still a need, or what's this need to invest in data acquisition and processing? And I think, you know, there's a lot of information services that are available that you might say are ready to use by countries, but even so, that information has to be taken, it has to be managed and distributed and used. An example might be forest fire detection systems. There's a lot of satellites that detect fire events and can distribute based on thermal detection. And there's a lot of that information is processed and provided as fire hotspots. In other cases, maybe more image processing might be required by the countries or desirable by the countries to produce the information that's needed, whether that's a flood map or a forest or land cover map. So I think what you're not necessarily needing to do is invest in satellite infrastructure. You can invest in IT infrastructure to store data and computer infrastructure to also enable you to do some processing. So I think it's a different type of investment and hopefully less early in the data processing and more about the final information products and the information that's really needed by the end users.
Thank you very much, Andy. I think that was a useful, two useful points. One is that the World Bank team with ESA and others really helping countries understand whether they are already maximizing the opportunities they have with the data they have available before jumping on to investing in Doppler radars that might still be necessary, but maybe can happen further down the line. And the other one was this clarification that countries wouldn't necessarily need to pay for satellite data that, of course, is available, but they would still need to make investments in terms of other infrastructure in countries, certainly looking at institutional issues and the value chain. How do they get the data? Where do they get it from? How do they prioritize this data? And then how do they distribute it, manage it, and use it accordingly? So those were very good points.
Could
do you
I
actually to add to that?
Yeah,
yes.
Could I come in with a comment?
Yes, please go ahead.
If you can hear me, Stephen Coulson from European Space Agency. I just want to be clear on the issue here. There's been a lot of mention that the data is free, and that is true from the Copernicus system. But that's the basic data, and what we think you and your client states would be more interested in is the information products derived from that data. And that requires processing, and that information comes at cost. Now, the cost we know very well. We've also spent the best part of the last 12 years developing those information products and services for something like 400 government institutes here in Europe. There's a whole range of information products available. And the advantage of all that investment that's been made, which is around 200 million euros between ourselves and the Commission, we are now at the position where the information services are of known performances, accuracies, limitations and constraints. So all that investment has been made. The services are there ready to go. Yes, they come at cost, but what we need to do and what we want to do together with you and your client states is actually demonstrate the benefit that these information products deliver. And then we can look into how we can integrate this on a sustainable basis into the activities that you run. So the costs will need to be covered. There are many models. I mean, that could be from the existing supply base that we have, which is largely European. Personally, I don't think that's a very sustainable way forward. A far more sustainable way forward is to try and get this technology and expertise transferred into the developing countries so that they're in a position to produce this information themselves locally and actually use it. All of that takes a long time, by the way. The most successful example we have of satellite information being used on a fully operational basis is meteorology. You see that every night on your TV screen, but I can tell you it took the best part of 25 years for satellite information to be fully integrated into numerical weather forecasting, and Pierre-Philippe knows much more about this than me. We started in 1978, and at that time there were in situ weather station ships in the Atlantic who thought there's no way you can measure wind speed from space. This just simply can't be done. Now we're at the position where in meteorology they could not actually function without the use of satellite information fully integrated. And that's what we want to do for environment, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. We have a long-term perspective. I think a question from Ross was, do we have resources on our side? Well, we do. And we're looking for a longer-term partnership with organizations like yourselves to achieve this. But it will take time. Now we have the Copernicus system. I think our director was a little modest in saying it's going to be significant. Andy said it will be a revolution. Frankly, I think it's the most ambitious, comprehensive Earth observation program that any space agency in the world is putting together. And it's an opportunity to put together operational information services for the environment and get these things used. So we're at the start. We've got a lot of experience. There are investments needed to be made. We have to look into the cost, but more significantly also the benefits. And we've run studies on our side, by the way. We could provide you this information. Independent studies from PwC looking into the socioeconomic benefit of satellite information, in particular the Copernicus system that we're putting together. And I can tell you that by far and away the biggest benefit area is policy adaptation in order to take account of the environmental changes that are happening due to climate change. So it's right in your area. There are big benefits to be achieved, but it's going to take time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I think, Kanta, I'm going to come to you next. Maybe you can also reflect on whether, you know, TTLs that are hearing this for the first time today, and, you know, will they be able through the e-learning course to understand this level of complexity, and, you know, how do we translate, how can we try to understand how do we manage this complexity and still move the agenda forward at the country level, because some of the examples that Stephen just provided on the meteorology side, 25 years to do certain things with the data, so that, you know, the TTLs themselves can try to see what would be, certainly they could potentially identify the gaps, data gaps that exist in the countries, and, you know, how the countries can benefit from the use of that data. But this longer term agenda, how they can start to grapple with it and see, you know, jointly with the countries, how to structure some investments that will move them in that direction. Kanta, you want to, but please touch on the other point that Ross also made.
Yeah,
also.
I think I will start off with Ross's question, which I think has partly been addressed by Steve's comment. I think that the sort of motivation for us to embark on this country through this PPCR perspective, trying to bring the clients into the conversation with the task teams and ESA, is one part of an important shift in the strategic dialogue and the policy adaptation that Steve referred to. What we want the conversation to be is not just about the satellite data, but the need for climate information to be a central part of the resilience conversation. And I think it's really changing the minds by demonstration of the benefits that Steve was referring to. And I think to Rachel's point as well, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding of what is needed. People are still thinking, I need a project, I need the biggest investment to go to the GCF. We want to sort of remove that and say, first of all, you need to enable yourself. So in the terms of reference that we are trying to work with the teams which are doing this piece of work, it's partly focused on the use of satellite data, but a large part of it is your stock taking of where is your data and information system on hydromet. And here we're not rebuilding the wheel, right? I mean, there is a whole WMO initiative where under the Global Framework of Climate Services, they have a template of stock taking that they do, needs and gaps assessment and costing. So where countries have done that, we are using that as a basis, but bringing in this new set of data. So assuming that if you fast forward and speaking on behalf of the team, what we would like to see is at the end of it, within your strategic framework of climate resilience, you're saying there is this whole pillar of work that is around the climate data, climate information, your institutional arrangements within your house, which is going to cost X number of dollars. And maybe there is a Y dollar component, which is how do we utilize Earth observation data, which we would like to package as a funding proposal that comes back to the PPCR or it goes to the GCF, but which includes some co-financing, we hope, from ESA as part of their own interest to make a development difference. Because as they said, they can reach the moon and the sky and all of that, but if ultimately it doesn't translate into development benefits, I think it will, so it's a win-win for us to think creatively on, we don't have to do this in 10 countries. I think our idea is to do it in 3 or 4 countries and do it well, where we have this package clearly spelled out, but which can be a game changer. So if everybody is talking about transformation and we're saying this is the transformation we're looking at here. So it is going to be hopefully a partnership that requires work, that requires building on existing system and constraints. I don't think we can ever, I think all the challenges that RT raises are fundamental and real. I mean, you know, the gaps in the infrastructure, the multiple bilateral interests of different infrastructure that is coming into the country that doesn't solve
30 years, then it'll take us 60 years.
Yeah, and I think we want to work it simple, but I think we want to think it. And this is where I think working with the task team to have that understanding of the end goal, and then I think to work collectively. But I don't think it's easy, but I think if we can do it in 2 or 3 countries and come up with a costed figure, you know, what is the initial transaction, what is the first 3 to 5 years, and then, because we talk about sustainability, of course, but we need to craft it in the sustainable model, but come up with the first 3 to 5 years dollar investment that we can harness together. I think that would be key. The second point that you talk about, just the E-module, the E-module, again, is then much more than just about the Earth observation. It is talking about some of the, looking at a project differently. I'm doing an agriculture investment, and I've put a lot of systems into place, and I think RT knows this well from the work they did in Nepal, which was actually under PPCR. It was one that went beyond the hydromet to develop the agri-services, making a link. It wasn't using sophisticated data sets, but a lot of our projects don't do that. Getting the right agro-meteorological data, and I should mention Anna's project in Uruguay, which is also very innovative. It's working bottoms up with the data, and that's the transformation we are trying to make, because we are saying that we have $2 billion of dedicated hydromet investments that the bank has put in, but we actually have $40 million that is going to our mainstream sectors, where we are not going that last mile towards the user. It requires some customization of products and users, not always with sophisticated data sets, sometimes very simple data sets, which we need to do. And that E-module is trying to shift the mindset of task teams to think of this service from the time they design their project, and not something that they've designed the project and it's under implementation, and now they say, well, we wish we had the right data sets to manage urban flooding better. It's difficult to build it at that point, right? So we hope that's the transformation. And then, of course, the whole world of EO through the special module, right?
So, Philippe, I will invite you now, and maybe if you also have some reflections on how to go about tackling the disaggregation at country level institutionally and data-wise. Go ahead, Pierre.
Okay, now it's easier than putting a man on the moon, I guess. But what I wanted to say is that I'm really happy to work with Kanta and Anna's team, because I feel there is something unique about this partnership on this topic. It's that we don't do a project here. We are really talking about a venture, a kind of enabling environment, if you want. So you can think of it as a highway, where ESA is basically building the highway. So for you, it would be for free, but everybody has to build little roads or bring their own cars or create an autogrill, whatever, to bring value to this, so that we, with public money, create a kind of marketplace to build opportunities for the people. So that's why, even if the data are for free, you still need to build this little road that connects to that. But once you have the environment doing this, then you can unleash opportunities for everybody. And it's not easy because there is a big human factor. It's not only about infrastructure. That's where education and capacity building comes in. That's where the dialogue with the end user and the extreme tailoring of the data comes in. And that comes with a cost, these things. And I believe to tackle this climate change issue, this kind of data infrastructure is a key enabling factors to bring, and it will bring with Copernicus, which is long-term, it will bring environmental democracy. So people will be accountable for what they do to the environment. And I think it's a key point of the partnership that should be highlighted. You will get a tool to make people responsible. And I hope it can address climate issues. Thank you.
Okay, yes, just another question. So if I'm a TTL here in the World Bank, and now I'm very curious because I've attended this BBL, well, this learning series today, what would you say if I'm a TTL and I want to know, okay, which data is already available and what's coming still online? Is there a way of easily finding out what type of data is already available and can be used, even if, you know, one would then look at the more deeper long-term engagement at the country level?
Yeah, we had this question several times. You want a kind of menu like when you go to the restaurant. And I'm afraid to disappoint you because you have to talk to the cook. There is such an extreme tailoring of this information just for the flood, just for the land cover. Everybody has its own definition. That there is no generic solution. You could think about the core layer of data that everybody uses, which is the highway. But on top of that, the local data, the in situ data comes and complement that. That's what happened in meteorology, actually. Every nation wants its own weather forecast, but they use a common global data set and then they tailor it for their own dynamics, etc. So yes, there is some information to address your question, but in any case, I recommend a dialogue because there is such a level of interpretation in this business of data that you can easily go to the wrong data set because there are so many open data. That's the other issue. You are flooded by data and you can pick up like 10 products on CI. Which one would you pick for your application? You will pick the one that comes first in Google search, which is a mistake. That's why there is a difference between what we do, which is an information service with an uncertainty bar on top of it and some quality control, with what you find online. So there is really this need.
Maybe Cancer, and then I have two hands here, so I want to do one more round.
I just want to add very quickly. I think this is where the special module with ESA is really helpful. It won't answer the TTL's last question, but it will really give you a good understanding on the range of applications. And for each of those applications, what are the metrics for flooding, for example? What is the resolution of the type of data available? How frequency is some of the satellites collecting this? So you can actually have an informed questioning and you can bring it into design. The second thing that Pierre-Philippe mentioned, which I would really encourage all of you to do because I've never done a MOOC from ESA before, but I am doing the Future Learn. And I can tell you it's very interesting. The modules are very short and sweet and you would actually learn a lot. So I encourage you to try doing it. I think it's in the second or third week, but it's very interesting and gives you lots of good examples and applications.
Excellent. So
Thanks for that, Kanta. By the way, I was told today that you will be featured in that MOOC, so that will be even more interesting.
That wasn't the reason I was promoting it. I haven't even seen what that comes, but I'm just saying that I've been in it for 2 weeks and I learned all about optical Earth observation, which is another leap in technology that really allows, you know, this differentiation of data sets.
That was a question that I also had from, but I'm going to allow the others to raise their questions. What's the difference between optical and radar data sets for those of us that are not familiar with this terminology? But please go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments.
you want to come closer? Because otherwise they might not hear you on.
Question for you, that one.
Yes. Well, why don't you come to the table over there?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nusha Tayebi. I'm a remote sensing consultant with the Water GP. There are a couple of comments I had. One was on remote sensing data, and the satellites have been in space for decades, and we've been collecting the data. But unfortunately, traditionally, this data has been driven by science and not by application and end users. And that's the gap that in the remote sensing community we call it crossing the valley of death, because there is the science that's constantly, advancing, and then we have the application, especially in terms of development and working with our clients that is just not advancing as fast as the science. So that's one of the things that we need to ask ourselves is that, beyond these collaborations that we have with different agencies, what is the sustainability and what's the need of the end user and the application? Because we might install something or we might have access to some data today, but 5 years from now, they're going to be new satellites. And are they going to have the capacity to continue growing as fast as the science? The other thing I wanted to mention, your question that you had about, having access to a menu of data. A couple of years ago in the Water GP, we had the same question. We had a lot of, data and presentations coming from different agencies, universities, private sector, and we kind of started asking ourselves, how can we use this data and what is the right application? So we have a publication that it was launched in May, and we've been working on it. We worked on it for a couple of years, looking at 8 hydromet variables and the application and the data and the satellite data that is available right now. That probably is not, needs to be updated a few years from now. But right now, who's the data provider, what type of data is available, what's the resolution, and most importantly, what's the application. So that's only for water and the application hydromet, but that's something that, it could grow in other applications like agriculture, et cetera.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nusha.
What's that?
And I have it would be great to add this as a module and link it with the online publication.
Yeah, and we had actually European Space Agency was involved in that publication. We had many of the space agencies there kind of overlooking at the data and peer reviewing the book. And I have the hard copy, and also it's available at InfoShop.
Very good.
What's the name? It's called Earth Observation for Water Resource Management.
Perfect. So all of you online, you might have heard Earth Observation for Water Resource Management. And we should make it known to our community. Go ahead.
So I know the climate change. Introduce yourself? Yes, I'm Anna Wucher from the climate change team, working in the same group as Kanta. I just wanted to make 2 quick observations. One is that on the e-module that we've been working, the team, so one of the objectives was also to have this, you mentioned about the value chain of climate services. But the idea of the value chain is not that you have to start here to get there. The idea of the value chain is how the different countries, as we observe, we have different entry points, right? We have countries that have very substantial technology in terms of infrastructure, but doesn't have the capacity, or vice versa. So the information that we're trying through the climate services module is exactly provide that sense, okay, what is the country position, where is your starting point, and what are the options and prioritizations that you have to go to develop those services. And it's a good segue of what you mentioned, because that is the idea of the task, is what is the key requirements in terms of users, ag, water, transport, what are the issues, and how you identify services that are needed. And then how we go backwards in terms of, okay, we identify a couple of key issues in terms of data needs and in terms of products, and we're going to start prioritizing that. The other thing I want to mention is that we are also working and maintaining the climate change knowledge portal in the World Bank. And we have been working with Pierre-Philippe for almost a couple of years now on trying to bring a lot of this data sets to the climate change knowledge portal. So it's not a bit of a menu of data, but trying to have a sense of what could be relevant basic information that might be useful at the sector level trying to understand or answer that. We're still not there, but hopefully we'll continue this partnership and get it there. The sea level rise data is there, and I want to say, so it's available for the World Bank now.
Thank you, Anna. Unfortunately, of course, I know that I would have a lot more questions, and probably some of you would have as well, but we will have to close. This is the time that we've set for this learning series. I want to thank you all, the guests online, Pierre-Philippe, Andy, Joseph, Stephen, Ross, James, those who left as well. I leave a thank you note to them. It's being recorded. Exactly. So, which leads me to the other point. The presentations and recording will be made available through a Learning Digest email. If nothing less, I think this discussion has instigated many of us to learn more, and we look forward to the launch of the e-course and looking at also other publications that are available. And I certainly look very much forward to hearing about the experience and implementing this partnership in the PPCR countries. So looking forward to hear about what will be the program like in Malawi and Uganda. And I'll take the point, Ross, of how we think about the forest investment program and fifth countries as well. And let me finally leave you with an encouragement note to look at the next upcoming PPCR Learning Series event. It will be on October 19th on climate resilience and insurance, which is another big topic of interest to our community. Thank you very much, all of you online and here, and I'm certain that we will come across soon again.
And let me thank you, Mafalda, for being so generous with your time and sharing this session so excellently today. And I would also like to thank Dominic, who has worked incessantly to put this in place with all the technology, and Luis, who is remotely probably with us from Sweden, and Kazi. I think the three of them have worked very hard behind the scenes to get this together, and I would like to appreciate them as well.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, all of you online. Look forward to the next round of discussion.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you're all welcome to visit us in Italy.
Yeah, we'd love to have the
We're on our way.
I missed the last opportunity. I shouldn't have.
I will request going in there.